Let's go for it! I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff. I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff.
Hey there, everybody. It's me, your buddy Dave. Thanks a lot for checking out my best of 2019 video. This is always a big one for me. I really enjoy making it. I enjoy putting it together. Just for people who might be new to this thing, I usually compile a list of anywhere between 75 to 100 or more albums released in the year. I whittle the list down. I used to do it to about 50, and now I've done it this year to about 25, and then we're going to talk about the top 10 on this video. So before we get to that top 10, let me give you the runners-up. I'll be back in about 3 minutes.
When I'm all alone, sometimes I think about it like I miss how it was. But that's just place the gun to my heart. I don't care 'cause Friday I'm in love. We had a plan.
For a sign of life, hope and hope still exists. He woke up a scientist. Don't wanna see dust from the catch downtown.
Shrink the room, darker and drape. Although you know how to use.
I'm about to get a weekend. You got me lying on my back. Howling.
Twisted as a blanket with a back road. Did you not knock her out and everything? She's always such an officer and play. It's so hard to get revenge. The human element drags you down. Like I love you, why won't we grow in the dark? I can leave now, but I just wait in this world, and I don't be the new Jake. No. It already happened. You said it was worth it. Got lost in my own skin.
Let's line him up, sister. Let's throw him back and lay him down. Put some sand on.
A lot of really great stuff on that list. They just didn't quite make the cut. You also might have noticed that albums from Wilco and the Pixies and Sleater Kinney and didn't even make the top 25. Does that mean this was a better than average year or what? I don't know. I would say my general opinion was that 2019 wasn't the greatest year. We did have some really excellent stuff, and that's what we're going to be talking about now. Let's just get going here with number 10.
far a long way. My fingernails and grind.
Coming in at number 10 is the most recent album from the Mark Lanegan Band. Mark Lanegan, one of the most celebrated singers in all of indie or alternative rock or whatever for the last 3 decades. Starting off with the Screaming Trees, of course, he's had a celebrated solo career. He's also been in Queens of the Stone Age. He had a group called the Gutter Twins with Greg Dully from Afghan Wigs that did some great stuff. He's had some really interesting collaborations with people over the years, like the Soul Savers and Isabel Campbell. But when he gets down to the Mark Lanegan Band, hard to say what the distinction is between a Mark Lanegan solo album and a Mark Lanegan band, only that Mark Lanegan solo typically seems to be more acoustic based and just sort of that haunting kind of thing. And when he does the band, it's obviously more upbeat, a little bit more rocking. In this case, there's also there's no elements of electronica or dance music or whatever that it sometimes appears with the Soul Savers. In this case, it's very hard to describe, but it's very solid. Always accentuates Lanegan's voice, which is the key asset to what he's been doing. Again, solid material, great lyrics, great performances. Mark Lanegan Band, Somebody's Knocking is my number 10.
Behind myself, yeah, I need to be away, falling out. I'm going away.
Coming in at number 9 is the newest and sadly final album from the California pop-punk trio, The Muffs. The album's called No Holiday. It was released in October of this year. I know that because it was released just a few weeks after lead singer and guitar player Kim Shattuck passed away. She died due to complications from ALS. It's a situation that she's been dealing with for she had been dealing with, I should say, for the 2 years prior to her death. So there's a lot of melancholy surrounding the album, and I could see, knowing myself, that I could see it elevating to a higher position because of sort of sympathy or because of my feelings about the Muffs and Kim Shattuck and the fact that I've been a fan for such a long time. But I am happy to say that that's not required, okay? That's not getting number 9 because of the sympathy vote. It's getting number 9 because it's another great Muffs album. These songs were songs that Kim had demoed over the past 20 plus years. They took these demos, and the other 2 members of the band, along with a ghost guitar player, kind of fleshed out the songs and made the final Muffs album. Due to Kim's ALS, she wasn't able to sing and she wasn't able to play guitar, so they had to use these pre-existing demos and then work around them. All things considered, it's an excellent album, lots of great songs, very reflective lyrics, and you get another side of Kim Shattuck. You don't get that snarling, angry, sarcastic, side. You get a more I don't want to say softer side because there's still a lot of aggression in there and anger, but there's a lot of happiness too, and a lot of just coming to terms with the fact that things are going good for me. I'm happy, and this is what I feel like writing about, and it's nice to see, especially considering the circumstances around its creation.
How long can the world go on under such a subtle God? How long can the world...
The number 8 album is the self-titled album from Purple Mountains, and like the previous album with the Muffs, there is a bit of tragedy attached to this album. It's the first album by Purple Mountains, but it's not the first album from the band's leader, David Berman. He was in the band Silver Jews, which had disbanded about 10 years ago, but made records all throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. Berman had returned to music after being gone for a long time. The album came out in July, and unfortunately, David Berman committed suicide in August of 2019, so just a few weeks after it came out. The album's gotten amazing reviews. It's, in my opinion, his best work. I like this better than the Silver Juice, to be honest. I think it's far more consistent. The lyrics are very depressing, and you can see through hearing it that this is his way of coping with this kind of intense depression and these feelings of just being a complete loser and just hating yourself and all of this. And it's sad and tragic, but it's also a very enjoyable listen because it feels like he worked through a lot of this I guess in light of circumstances, he probably didn't. But either way, if you want to see a really, really talented songwriter working through years and years of emotions and appearing to come to some sort of breakthrough, or at least some sort of resolution to one's feelings, then the Purple Mountains record is right up your alley. If you like that old Sad Bastard music, this definitely fits the bill.
Singing new songs straight to my heart. Then you go.
Coming in at number 7 is the second album from the Texas band Moving Panoramas. It's called Into. Obviously, that's their second album. Moving Panoramas is really this woman named Leslie Sisson, who used to be in Brooklyn, used to play as a touring member of a lot of indie rock bands, knows a lot of people in the music industry, the indie world, but relocated back to her home state of Texas and formed this new group. In 2015, they released their debut album, One. It was in my top 10 of that year, maybe even top 5. I'd have to look it up. It's a really great mix of classic shoegaze mixed with some 90s just straight up indie rock and artists like Belly and stuff like that had more ethereal qualities to their sound. They weren't so much hard. They had kind of a I don't know how to describe the sound, but I mean it had almost a 4AD-ish feel, but a little bit more of an edge, the same way Swerve Driver had a little bit more of an edge. But again, Moving Panoramas don't get into that extreme noise. They just utilize just elements of a shoegaze sound. So if you don't like, say the chaos of like My Bloody Valentine or something like that, or classic Swerve Driver, that wouldn't deter you from liking Moving Panoramas. The songs are the emphasis in this band. So some people consider Moving Panoramas to be the best band in Texas right now. They certainly do get a lot of critical acclaim. They're likened to bands like, Best Coast or some of the classic 4AD stuff, like I mentioned. Yet it's not at all a throwback. It's got great guitar playing. It's got great instrumentation. The production is really solid. Panoramas Into is coming in at number 7. Okay, number 6 is the newest offering from the legendary LA band Red Cross. It's called Beyond the Door. It's their 7th album, though the band did form in 1978 when they were just 11 and I think 13 years old when the band actually formed. Now, they haven't been making records that entire time. Red Cross broke up in 1997, then reformed about 10, 12 years later, and they've made 2 albums since their return. The new album, Beyond the Door, is similar to, in terms of quality, to their last album, Researching the Blues, or even going back to their classic 90s material. Red Cross rarely ventures into any sort of serious content in their lyrics. These guys are about having fun. They have this spirit of great 70s hard rock. Think of like, Kiss and Aerosmith and that kind of stuff, mixed in with a great punk rock mentality and sort of attitude, but they're not afraid of writing very, very catchy and melodic songs. Beyond the Door is no different. It's a great, great collection of songs. It baffles me every time Red Cross puts out new music that it doesn't get a wider audience, but I suppose at this point these guys are in their 50s and teenagers just aren't going to latch onto it no matter how good the record is. Just doesn't matter. Coming in at number 5 is the newest album from Seattle band Versing. The album is called 10,000. It's on the Hardly Art label. This is my introduction to the band. I had not heard of them prior to this, and the album struck me because if you know anything about me, if you ever listened to my radio show New Day Rising, you know that every show ends with Sonic Youth. So obviously Sonic Youth is very important to me, and bands that sound like Sonic Youth, as long as not being an overt ripoff or whatever, are automatically appealing. If you can pull off that sound, that combination of dissonance and noise and slightly different tunings, but with very melodic songs, you're appealing to my sweet spot, basically, okay? Versing does that. They do have a very, very heavy Sonic Youth vibe. Also, maybe And You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead, versus a couple other bands that are able to pull off that sound very, very well over the years. I'm sure there's others that I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but Versing is one that really, really is exceptionally good at it. And as much as I like all of the post-Sonic Youth music, the Thurston Moore stuff, Lee Ronaldo stuff, even Kim Gordon's new solo album that she put out this year, as much as I do like that stuff, them individually is just not as good as the four of them together. So what I'm hearing in Versing is some hope for me. You know, this is a young band working through their influences, working into their own style. Perhaps in a few years they'll be doing something completely different. Everyone knows Sonic Youth's early stuff didn't sound like their middle period stuff versus their later period stuff. So I think what this does is very much capture Sonic Youth middle period material, and I like it. Versing.
An exception to the rule, always an exemption. There's always an exception to the rule.
My number 4 album is the debut album from Better Oblivion Community Center. Now, this is a new band, but it features people that are not really new. It's a new collaboration between Connor Oberst and Phoebe Bridgers. Now, I'm not super familiar with Phoebe Bridgers other than I know her name and I know a little bit about her, but I'm very familiar with Connor Oberst. Been listening to his music for almost 20 years at this point. I didn't live in Omaha when he was coming up through the the open mic circuit, the singing at coffee houses and stuff like that. I kind of caught on to his music by about 2002, 2003 or so, when Bright Eyes was firmly established. Well, since he hung up the Bright Eyes mantle about 2011, 2012 or so, he's gone through a series of bands. You know, he had his Mystic Valley band. He's done some solo records, one an acoustic ones with full bands. So this whole collaboration between Connor and Phoebe Bridgers came as kind of a surprise to most people, I guess, unless you're in their inner circle, which I'm not. It came out, it is just so refreshingly good. It is two really, really great songwriters, seemingly just bouncing great ideas off of one another. Lyrics are great, the music is great, the performances are great, the singing, I mean, everything about it is great. Carla Azar, who's the drummer of Autolux, performs on the album. It's just, there's so many, just a lot of great musicians that perform on it. I missed them when they came through town this year and performed. I'm hoping this is not just a one-off and that they continue making new music, because it really seems to have been like a shot in the arm to Connor's career. He's gotten a lot more attention this year with Better Oblivion than with his last solo record, which was a phenomenal record that was actually released twice, by the way, an acoustic version and then a full band version. But either way, if this is what it takes to get a due attention paid, then I'm all for it. The Better Oblivion Community Center, fantastic record.
Yeah, minimum, medium, maximum, cool. All logic ties you up and rapes you.
Number 3 on my countdown really is 2 different albums. They're sort of tied, but it's just because they're both the same artist. And Juliana Hatfield is who it is. Okay, duh, let's just reveal it. Juliana Hatfield released 2 albums in 2019. At the very beginning of the year, she put out an album of original material called Weird. It's a very, very good album where she delves into her feelings of loneliness, but also of acceptance of sort of being alone. It's a different approach to writing, but it fits in with what you know about Juliana Hatfield. She's an odd bird. She's a very talented, though odd bird. And the album is great, and it just shows her sort of philosophy on life, that she is somebody in her late 40s, perhaps early 50s, I'm not really sure of her age, never been married, and she likes her lifestyle. And although that might not sound like great subject matter for an album, it is an enjoyable indie pop record, so I don't want to cast any aspersions on that, make you think you're just going to be bummed out. It's not that way at all. It's an enjoyable listen, and again, Juliana Hatfield having such a fucking creative renaissance at this point. But then later on in the year, she put out another album, second in her series of, the Juliana Hatfield Sings, and then a classic artist that she is really into, or was really inspirational to her. Last year, she put out her Juliana Hatfield Sings Olivia Newton-John, which was a huge surprise because I've always said I don't like Olivia Newton-John, but I really enjoyed the album. Her passion for the artist, her interest in presenting this material to different people and to showing why it was so important to her really came through, and it made it an amazing album, and it was in my top 10 of last year. This year, Juliana Hatfield takes on the Police. Now, I'm already a fan of the Police, so it wasn't a stretch for me to sort of see why somebody would want to dedicate an album to the Police. Juliana does great versions. She does do some of the hits. You do hear Every Breath You Take and Roxanne, but she doesn't limit it to just the hits. I mean, she does like Canary in a Coal Mine. That wasn't a single, you know. She did Rehumanize Yourself and some other songs that weren't the best known Police songs. And it makes it, again, a passion project, something that you can see why this artist was so important to her. Now, the one thing I will say is one of the big appeals of the Police is Stuart Copeland's drumming, because it's so unique and it's so just part of the pattern of their music is that the drums and the unusual percussion that he uses. On some of these tracks, for Juliana Hatfield, she uses a drum machine, okay? So it does give it a different vibe. You're just going for the basic melody of the song. But then again, if she would have used, I mean, she does use a drummer on some tracks, but if she would have hired some guy to like mimic Stuart Copeland, it wouldn't have been as good, and it would have sounded, I don't know. I mean, there are a few Stuart Copelands out there, right? So it's not a surprise that they used a different approach on this one. But anyways, it's a fantastic, fantastic collection. Weird, her album of original material, Sings the Police, the album of covers, they both take up the number 3 spot. Coming in at number 2 is the newest release from Swerve Driver. Swerve Driver, one of my all-time favorite bands. They broke up in the late 90s. They've been back for a number of years. Future Ruins marks their second album since their return. I Wasn't Born to Lose You came out in 2015. It was amazing. Now here we are a couple years later. Swerve Driver's got a new record. The album does not have the production excess, I think, of the last album. And excess maybe might not be the right word, but a lot of the extra flourishes are not there on Future Ruins. It's a little bit more of a stripped down sound, but it is so fucking perfect. Now I want to take this note right here to point out that I bought this album a year and a half in advance through Pledge Music. Still have never received it. So fuck you, Pledge Music. But I did get a copy of the album through the radio show. I have a CD. Obviously, I've heard the album a million times. That's why it's my number 2 album. It ranks very highly up there with the classic Swerve Driver stuff. There's not the chaotic, the maelstrom of all that noise and hiss and whatever. They've got it down to where I don't want to say a science. That seems to sound like formulaic, but there is a Swerve Driver sound, and these guys have obviously perfected it. They don't need all that. It's a different era. You can present that sort of noise and fuzz and chaos in different ways. You don't need to do it the same way you did it in 1991. I saw them live this year on this tour earlier in the spring. It was fantastic. Swerve Driver is still delivering the goods. I hope they continue going. And because their material is not this is better, in my opinion, the new album than 99th Dream, which was their final album of their original run back in the late 90s. So I see no reason for them not to continue to keep going.
Keep an eye on CD elements. You built some fortress to keep us out. Could you ever be convinced that it's
Coming in at number 1 is an album that doesn't even have a physical format. Okay, it was released digitally. It's coming out in physical format in February, so I could see why some of you might be already chomping at the bit to say, does that really count? Well, it counts because it's the best new material to come out in the year of 2019. I'm talking about the new album from Cursive called Get Fixed. It's the band's 9th full-length album. They formed in 1997. They have had a number of hiatuses in between, but when they got back together last year to put out the album Vitriola, which was in my top 10 of last year, I don't think people realized how much of a creative spark was really in this band. This album, the performances are so solid. The lyrics are so poignant and so relevant to today. Very, very powerful. This is the Cursive that people have wanted to hear. I've liked all the different sounds. The Mama I'm Swollen, Happy Hollow is one of my favorite albums that they've done. But I understand why people say, well, they want that ugly organ domestica kind of, we want Tim Kasher to be pissed and we want him to be, expressing that anger in some sort of way. Doesn't have to be the same way you did it in the 90s because nobody's the same person. I think finally Kasher has found that magic, I don't know, the magic sauce or whatever, to capture that same anger and that aggression and that ability to focus it and channel it through his songs without having to sound like you're a retro band to yourself, Yeah, the cello is back. They have a cello player now, but that doesn't mean anything about, okay, well, it's just the ugly organ part 2. It's not, okay? It's vastly different, and the lyrics are different topically and everything. So Get Fixed right now is only available digitally. It's coming on vinyl and CD very, very shortly. So get it digitally if you want to. I don't know, wherever you buy your music, listen to it on Spotify or whatever, some shit. But go ahead and pre-order it through the label. I'm telling you, this album is so fucking solid. I've been familiar with Cursive for decades, okay? They're another Omaha band. And I don't just automatically put them in a high spot just because of who they are. But it's deserved. Vitriola and Get Fixed are part of a pattern, and maybe they'll have another one beginning of next year or something. Who knows? This band is on fire, and when you're on fire, you got to just put out the material. Just keep doing it. There's this resurgence of interest. They're touring a lot more. A lot more people are at the show. There's just this, you can tell there's something connecting again with Cursive. Very, very happy to see it. This #1 album, very, very well deserved.
Ourselves, now we don't care for nobody else, not at all.
Okay, everybody, hope you dug this list. Maybe do a little research, check out some of this stuff. If you thought I might have missed something or you just have anything clever to say, let's try to keep the nastiness to yourself. Please leave me a comment. I would appreciate it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Happy New Year. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.